welcome back to the Saturday Scholars College Football Podcast. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. That is Xan. I am Shoob, and today we are here to cover Big 12 win totals, Part 3. Today we will be covering the four newcomers from the Pac-12, the four corner schools, and BYU, Arizona, Arizona State, Brigham Young, Colorado, and Utah. This is a pretty fun batch. We got a couple Big 12 contenders here, a couple playoff contenders. Well, I don't know, maybe three playoff contenders in this batch, depending if you're EA Sports or not. But I think that this is a fun group to talk about. And let's get into it, man. How we doing on this Monday night? You ready to wrap up the Big 12?
Ready to wrap it up, man. Let's get on to the West Coast teams, or the West teams.
The Mountain West teams is really what they are. We're heading to the Mountain West time zone plus Arizona, which technically is Mountain West time zone, but really not. All right. So starting at the top, Arizona, U of A, the Wildcats come in with a win total of 7.5 wins. Slight juice to the over there at minus 120, basically even on both sides, according to Caesars. New head coach, Brent Brennan, comes in to Tucson. He came over from San Jose State. He had a 34-48 record in 7 seasons at San Jose State. But if you break it down, his first 2 seasons there at San Jose State, 3-22. But then his final 5 seasons, he went 31-26. And keep in mind, that is a pretty tough job, San Jose State. So if you're batting above 500, a place like that, that's a pretty good job. So his final 5 years had a winning record there. Arizona, of course, last year you lose Jedd Fisch, who left for Washington, kind of a snake move, in our opinion. We put out multiple videos about that on this channel for Arizona fans. You guys showed out in our videos, so we appreciate that. But Jedd Fisch just took off and left for Washington when really this team was just so set up and still is set up pretty well to have a pretty good season and contend for a Big 12 championship and a playoff appearance. So there is still a lot to like with this team, but a transition at the top of the coaching staff, certainly something that you have to factor in when talking about this team. So now that Brent Brennan is in the Power 5 and the Power 4, what's your say on Arizona for 2024 under first-year head coach Brennan?
Well, Arizona's a very intriguing team, Shoob. I mean, they were top 20 in both offense and defense efficiency last year, which is crazy. When you think of the Arizona Wildcats, that's not something that you really think of. So it'll be interesting to see because we basically have a whole new staff this year. I mean, Dino Babers was the head coach over at Cuse, and now he's the OC over here for Brent Brennan. That'll be interesting. And then you've got the defensive coordinator, Dwayne Aquina. So we'll see how this works out, man. But I think the big thing here to highlight with Arizona is that they're actually a very well-rounded team, despite losing Jedd Fisch and a couple pieces. But for the most part, they retained a lot of the key parts of this team, which is very important. Obviously, you have Noah Fafita coming back. I mean, Noah Fafita's young. He's really good. He's proven. And we're hoping that, he can continue that level of prowess that he had under Jedd Fisch. And if that happens, Arizona's in a great spot. We look at what they have here at the running back position, man. And I mean, they have 2 really good running back transfers coming in. They have Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt coming in, who's a 1,200-yard rusher with 17 tutties from New Mexico. And then they're going to split carries with Quali Conley, who's an 800-yard rusher with 9 tutties from San Jose State. So they've got over 2,000 yards coming in at running back. So that's something to really look forward to if you're an Arizona Wildcat faithful. Then, of course, you've got Trattoria McMillian coming back. I mean, that dude's an absolute beast. 1,400 yards and 10 tutties. Come on now. Like,
Projected
that's
top
insane.
10 pick. He could go in the top 10 in the draft this year.
Yeah, he's an absolute beast. Now, they did also bring in Ray Mello Murphy from Old Dominion. But otherwise, like, this wide receiver group is going to have to step up a little bit and support Trattoria McMillian because he can't do it all by himself. They did bring in Sam Molson from San Jose State as well, the tight end, create a big body there, but we'll see if that's beneficial. I look at the offensive line, Shoob, and I think it's going to be a pretty average unit despite losing Jordan Morgan to the NFL. I would classify them strictly as an average unit. Not good, not bad, an average unit. And I think that will be good enough to kind of propel this offense. So this offense was top 20th in efficiency last year. I think they definitely have the potential to stay there, provided Dino Babers does the proper job. I mean, we have the talent to stay there. we'll see that if Arizona is able to maintain that level of play. So that's something that's really nice if you're an Arizona Wildcat faithful. I expect them to be top 20 or top 30 in offensive efficiency this year. They're going to be a solid squad. We look over at defense, man. Their whole D line is basically transfers. Some of them grade out really well, though. They've got Chuba Mai coming in from UC Davis, and they've got Kevin Darton coming in from Cuse. But then the rest of the guys are more like not a lot of playing time, not really so much that we can grade them on. So there's a little bit of a question mark there, but we do know that they do have some players on the defensive line that can be impactful. So I'm going to say it's going to be an average defensive line unit. That's about what I'm expecting from them. Again, on lines of scrimmage, they're not good, they're not bad, but they are respectable, and that's pretty solid there. You look up at the next level, man. You've got Jacob Manu coming back. It's good to have returning production at that level. And then you also have Justin Flo, former five-star. I mean, if you all know that name, I mean, he was a former five-star, one of the top, recruited linebackers in his class when he came out, and they got him from Oregon. So it'll be interesting. I think that front seven has some potential. So we'll see what that looks like come the future. We look back at the back end here. Takario Davis returns. That's a big get back because he's a pretty dang good corner. And then you return Traden Dukes, who's also pretty good as well. So I really like what they have at that position. You also return both safeties and Gunnar Maldonado and Dalton Johnson. So I'm really liking what I see here from Arizona, man. I think they're a pretty well-rounded team. I don't see any glaring weaknesses at any level. If anything, this is going to be a tough team to beat in the Big 12, and this is why they're certainly contenders. We jump to the schedule, man, and they're sitting there at a line of 7.5 with pretty not even juice to both sides, but close enough given like what some of these are labeled as now. But they play New Mexico and NAU. Good, you get a little couple exhibition games. You're going to win those two. You'll start 2-0. Then you got to go at Kansas State, and that's where it gets a little tough because that's going to be a very hard introductory to the Big 12. Let me see.
Well,
Shoob, is
keep in
this a Big
mind,
12 game?
yeah, I was
I
about
don't
to
think
say
so.
this is one of those where they play as a non-conference match, but so this is the thing. So they're gonna get introduced to Kansas State in their Big 12
But it's not going to be a
opener
Big
as an
12 game.
affiliate member, but technically it's not a Big 12 conference game because they're finishing out the non-conference series and treating it that way. So it won't count against either team in the standings if they lose it in the conference standings.
And still, nonetheless, that's going to be a tough game for them. But then you get a bye week before Big 12 play, which is really nice because you get a bye week to go at Utah. Utah is, considered to be one of the front runners to win the conference this year. The fact that you get to start with them early in the year, first game, and you get a bye week to prepare for them, I think that's very crucial for Arizona. I think they can definitely give the Utes a game over there. I see that as a probable game. I still kind of lean Utah there, but I definitely can see Arizona taking that game given the circumstances. Then you've got Texas Tech. Texas Tech, we're both a little bit higher on, but you are at home in that game. That should be an interesting one. I think Texas Tech, being all the way out there in West Texas, this could become like a little bit of a rivalry in the future. Then we go at BYU. Should win that game. You're definitely a notch over BYU. Colorado, we'll see what Colorado looks like by this point in the season. Colorado does have some improvement, but I would expect Arizona to win this game. Then you go at UCF, which is kind of a far travel. You got to go all the way to Florida to play this game. Late season, we'll see if you're banged up, what you're looking like. But this is going to be a kind of a toss-up kind of game, and we'll see what KJ Jefferson's looking like for UCF, or if he's still healthy come this part of the season. So that will determine a lot for Arizona. Then you get a bye week to prepare for Houston, which you don't really need a bye week to prepare for Houston, but you got it nonetheless. You'll probably win. And I really like this late season bye week just in case McMillan gets banged up or one of these running backs goes down, or maybe Fafita's got like a tweak somewhere and he's not playing as well because he's fighting on an injury. You've got a whole bye week here late season to get back in shape and make a push to the Big 12 championship. You get Houston pretty easy, and then you go at TCU, which is not going to be easy, and then you get Arizona State, which I expect you to wipe the floor with Arizona State. So two of those last three, you're probably going to be a heavy favorite in. So that's really nice for Arizona. They're line 7.5, man. I look here and I say, like, where are they going to lose? Maybe K-State, maybe Utah, maybe Texas Tech, maybe UCF, maybe TCU. That's like 5 potentials, but you would have to lose all 5 of those to get this under, and then maybe like slip up against Colorado or something of that nature. But Quite honestly, Shoup, I don't see them losing all five of those. They're gonna win some of these games. If anything, I see Arizona going 9-3 or 10-2. I think they'll be a pretty solid team this year. I think 8-4 at the minimum. I think this over is a pretty safe play, and so I'm gonna go at this over for Arizona with pretty high confidence.
High confidence.
High confidence.
I love
I
it.
think they
I
can
love
win.
it.
I think they can win eight.
All right, let's go. So Zan with high confidence going on the over for U of A. So I kind of have the same assessment. I share your confidence in this team. One thing about Dino Babers, just want to point out, so this is not his first time as the offensive coordinator at Arizona, believe it or not. If you look back at his coaching history, he was the OC at Arizona in 1998 through 2000. So it's not his first time. It may be almost 25 years later, but not his first time as the OC at Arizona. So that's just kind of funny.
Welcome
Um,
back, Dino.
Welcome back, Dino. 25 years later. It's been since Y2K since he's back at the OC spot in Tucson. But anyways, yeah, man, this I just want to say I had such a huge appreciation for Arizona's season last year, going 10-3, seemingly coming out of nowhere. And honestly, if you were to really adjust the season for um, basically the back half of the season, if you cut the season in half and just look at how good teams were middle of the season and on through the rest of the season, you can make an argument that Arizona, for a majority of the back half of the season, was one of the best teams in the country, probably like a top 10 team. And I just think it's a shame that they lost those early season games to Mississippi State in overtime, which they really shouldn't have lost. That game was a complete fluke. They had like four turnovers and lost in overtime to Mississippi State. They shouldn't have lost that game. And then they lost to USC in a shootout. They only lost by a couple points, I believe a two
And that's
point
because
conversion or
Caleb Williams,
something.
man. It's hard to beat Caleb Williams.
It was at the beginning of the year before we knew that Arizona was going to be really good and before we knew that USC was going to just fall apart and lose a bunch of games. But those are two teams that I feel like, man, if Arizona replayed those two games later in the season, they probably beat Mississippi. Well, they definitely beat Mississippi State and they probably beat USC. And so I just think like, man, if it just seems like something that if they just had things go their way in either one of those games, you're looking at a team that would have finished 11-2 and maybe would have been a fringe playoff contender last year. But either way, looking into this season, yeah, it is just the timing of Jed Fish leaving just really sucks. Again, we made a video about it. Go check that out on our channel. But I do like Brent Brennan as a coach, but of course, there's going to be a little bit of transition here. Obviously, love McMillan, but when you lose Jacob Coing and you lose Tanner McLaughlin, the tight end, two of their best receivers outside of McMillan, that's going to be a huge drop off. So there's going to be a drop off all around at skill position talents here, by retaining McMillan. And McMillan isn't even, it's a question whether he's going to be fully healthy going into the season, too. I know he's dealing with an injury, but I'm sure he'll be able to get back by the beginning of the season. And luckily, they start out with UNM and NAU. So that shouldn't be a problem, I would hope, if you're an Arizona fan. Um, I found it interesting that Jonas Savanea, projected late first round or projected possibly early second round draft pick, they're moving him out to right tackle. But I do think this offensive line is probably gonna retain its prowess. I think even with the loss of Jordan Morgan. And then as far as defensively, man, I do like the secondary a lot. I think the back end definitely is the strength of this defense. I think that the defensive line is where the questions are, in my eyes. But my model is pretty high on Arizona. My model has 9.3 wins for Arizona. So my model is kind of seeing what you're seeing, Zan. And I kind of agree with it. I think that obviously with Fafita coming back, I mean, that's huge. Fafita, he's going to be projected to be about like a day two guy in the draft, I think, maybe third round as of right now. Maybe a day three guy if, he doesn't, if, depending on how the draft shakes out. But if he just wasn't 5'11, and 5'11 is probably a little bit generous. He's 5'11, 194. That's what he's listed as. If he was just a few inches taller, maybe a little bit thicker, I think this guy could be a possibly first round draft pick. I think he has the talent, but it's the size that's really holding him back and doesn't have the biggest arm. But the kid can play, and I love watching him play. And I think that if he was just a bigger physically, I think he could make a play for a first round draft pick. And obviously, that's just going to carry this team. I think you have Noah Fafita, who I also have a Heisman future on 30-1. I don't expect it to hit, but I just took a flyer on that. So when you have Noah Fafita, in my opinion, one of the best quarterbacks in the country, that's going to carry you pretty far, especially when every game on your schedule is a possible win. And my model has them favored in a lot of games, 9.3. The only toss-ups that I have is at Kansas State and at Utah. That's really it. I don't have them as an underdog in any game, really. Not even a single game. Those two games, Kansas State and Utah, are toss-ups. So the model I think is really liking Fafita coming back for sure. But I do think that there's potential for the offense to regress just because you don't have the litany of receiving options that you did last year. And there probably will be a little bit of transition with Brent Brennan, new coaching staff. Jed Fish was just a phenomenal coach, and I think that that's definitely an intangible that you have to factor in somehow here. So I'm totally with you, man. I'm pretty confident this team can win 8 games. So I like the over here. I'm surprised that the line is down as low as it is, but you got 3 potential first round picks on the roster. I mean, that's got to be good for something, man. It's got to be good for something. I'm going over, but I'm gonna go at it with just low confidence. I'm not as high as you because I do think that you're just a Fafita injury or McMillan injury away from this team potentially having problems. And you do have those early season slate at Kansas State, at Utah, at UCF, at TCU. We're Texas Tech was also a team that we're both pretty high on relative to the market. It's not the easiest schedule, that's for sure, in terms of Big 12 play. So because I'm higher on a lot of these teams, I'm not just going to say that Arizona wipes through this schedule. So that's why low confidence on that over there. But I guess we'll see. But point is, we both like the over here, and I feel pretty good about it as long as you get a good, strong season out of Noah Fafita. Okay, moving on. Arizona State. Let's head up to Tempe. Arizona State, they come in with a win total of 4.5 wins. Huge juice to the under, a -170 there on Caesars. Kenny Dillingham comes into his second season at ASU. Pretty tough first year for Dillingham. They went 3-9, a tough rebuilding situation that Dillingham is facing just overall at Arizona State. Definitely not one of the easier head coaching situations to inherit after the complete just mess that Herm Edwards left him on and off the field there. So it is a tough rebuilding situation, but obviously, Arizona State fans you just gotta preach patience with Dillingham. But year two, the outlook not necessarily the greatest, of course. Of course, the win total is only 4.5 wins. Do you see reason for optimism here? Is there any hope that maybe year two is where Arizona State can start turning around under Kenny Dillingham?
I mean, we'll see, man. They brought in Marcus Arroyo from UNLV to be the OC. He's got a lot of coaching experience. We'll see if that helps, elevate them. But I look at this roster, man, and I mean, you've got Sam Leavitt coming in from MSU, and you've got Jeff Sims coming in from Nebraska. Neither one of those guys are really great quarterback options, unfortunately. You've got Cam, and that's just being nice about it. You've got Cam Scatabo playing at, you brought him back. He's a tough, bruising runner. I do like him. He's a 800-yard guy with nine tutties. But other than that, man, I mean, I like the rest of this offense. There's no significant standouts in that wide receiver room. There's just no one that jumps off the page that can be the alpha there or do anything. The offensive line looks relatively average, if not bad. Then the defensive line looks average at best. They did get a good little ad there from Louisville with Jeff Clark, who grades out pretty well. But overall, I mean, the D line might be average at best, as I said. The linebacking room is all transfers, man. So I don't know what to expect from the linebacking room. This could be a decent unit, but again, it's kind of iffy. And then we look at the corners, man, and they have transfers on both sides of the ball projected to start from Wazoo and LSU. Granted, they got Cole Martin from Oregon, who's going to be a solid nickel corner, but other than that, I don't really know what they've got there, especially with this LSU guy who grades 93 out of high school, but didn't really see a lot of time at LSU, and that maybe with reason. And then, I don't know, man, this team's just not very good. Like from top to bottom, this team has so many glaring issues. They were 94th in offensive efficiency last year, if my numbers are correct. And that's pretty terrible, Shoob. And I don't expect it to be much better this year, if I'm being honest with you. I think they're going to hover in that range, if not maybe be slightly worse. Defense, top 60, barely, but I think we're kind of looking at more of the same here, man. I like Kenny Dillingham. I just don't like this roster. And I don't think this is a roster that can do much of anything. I mean, you start with Wyoming, and Wyoming isn't going to be a complete cakewalk. I mean, that's a game that you should win, but Wyoming's a well-coached team. And if it's early season, and if you don't have, all your chickens in a coop here, you're gonna lose this game. So you got to be careful. And then you play Mississippi State, which I expect you to lose. You go at Texas State, you'll probably win that one. Then you go at Texas Tech, I expect you to lose this game. You go on a bye week to prepare for Kansas, I expect you to lose still. You play Utah, I expect you to lose. You go at Cincinnati, and this is where it kind of gets to the nitty gritty here because Cincinnati is one of those teams that you might be able to beat, but the problem is it's at Cincinnati. And so these toss up games being kind of away doesn't really work well in your favor. So I'm kind of leaning Cincinnati there too. I mean, Cincinnati's got some good offensive weapons. They got a good O line. I like more what I see with Cincinnati. I would lean Cincinnati in favor on that. You get a bye week to prepare for Oklahoma State, but again, by this point in the season, and Oklahoma State's kind of a notch above you, and they're at home, I don't think you beat the Pokes. Then you play UCF, who's a pretty solid team. I don't think you beat UCF. Then you play Kansas State. I don't think you beat Kansas State. I mean, that's a gauntlet right there. Oklahoma State, UCF, Kansas State. That's a rough part of the schedule. Then you get a little bit light with BYU, but then you got to go play Arizona. So you're playing a gauntlet. You're playing like a lot of the better teams in the Big 12 on your schedule, and you don't really have a great roster on board. And I'm not even fully confident in your non-con. At best, I think you go 2-1 in non-con, but there's a chance that you might even go 1-2 in non-con. And let's say even best case scenario, you go 2-1 in non-con. How many conference games can I actually expect Arizona State to walk out of here with? Maybe the BYU game, maybe the Cincinnati game. So best case scenario, they get two in non-con. They get what, maybe two in conference games, and they're still sitting there at four. And this is like kind of my best case scenario. This is a heavy under for me, Shub. I'm going under on the Arizona State Sun Devils, and I'm going at it with high confidence.
Oof. Zan's coming here with high confidence on the Arizona schools right here. So I'm going to agree with you. I'm just going to fire it off as well. I'm going to go under 4.5 wins with medium confidence, and that's because we're getting that extra half there on that line, even though there's a huge juice to the under there. So not much. If you're actually betting this number, you got to lay 17 to win 10. But anyways, I'm going to go at it with medium confidence, not completely high confidence. And the reason I'm not going at it with complete high confidence is because I do think that last year was just a tough year to judge Kenny Dillingham and Arizona State because first of all, the Jaden Rashad experiment didn't work out. They had a bunch of injuries at quarterback. Trenton Bourguet was terrible. I'm surprised he's still there, honestly. And then the offensive line, they had injuries out the wazoo. They were playing running. They were running one wildcat for a good bit there last season. So like it just wasn't. I think because of that, you just can't judge this offense. I really do think that this is almost sort of like a year one for Kenny Dillingham, in my opinion, just assuming that they just have better QB health and offensive line health by default.
Their QB situation is bad, man. They
Well,
don't
I'm
have a
not
good
saying
QB
it's
on that
good.
roster.
I'm not saying it's good, but I think it's good it's better than having to run Wildcat for a good amount of time like they had to do last year. But
Maybe.
the point is taken. Yeah, you yeah, well, hey man, I'm trying to be optimistic here. But
Their quarterbacks are pretty bad, man.
yeah, Sam Leavitt and Jeff Sims. You're not going to get much done there with those two guys, but I do think just simply having health, just having those guys not get hurt can be a little bit better. So I do think this offense can improve just a little bit just with sheer bodily health. And I think that Kenny Dillingham is, I think that the fact that he got them inside the top 100 in efficiency despite all those issues last year just shows how good of a mastermind of a play caller he is. Because let's keep in mind, like Kenny Dillingham got this job because he was a phenomenal play caller at Oregon. He's pretty
Oh, I love Kenny
creative.
Dillingham, but they just don't have the roster, man. Like the X's and O's matter, but the Jimmies and Joes matter more, and they don't have any Jimmies nor Joes.
Agreed there, but I think that they can improve from sub 100. That's what I'm calling for. Calling for minor improvement above sub 100. But yeah, shout out to Cam Scatterbo. That kid's a great player. He's a bowling ball. He's a good player. And
He
then
is vulnerable.
defensively, I was surprised they were 67th last year in defensive efficiency. This defensive line was the worst in the Big 12 in terms of line yards by a country mile last year. I they did do a lot of work in the portal just to add size, but I'm not really confident in here. I mean, this defense is just a bunch of portal adds, just hoping that something sticks and it gets better. So I'm not really expecting much from the defense, to be honest. My model has 4.2 wins for Arizona State, so just above 4 wins actually, which I think is sort of optimistic. But again, we got the 4.5 here on the win total, so I do think that the sports books are expecting improvement by default from Arizona State. The problem is their schedule is pretty dang tough. I mean, I know last year the Pac-12 was really good, of course. That was like the best, the toughest the Pac-12 has been in years. But if you look at Arizona State's schedule, I mean, just look at the non-conference play. Like this is they are legitimately at risk of going 0-3 in non-conference play. I'm telling you that because Wyoming is no pushover of a Mountain West team. Last year, Wyoming beat Texas Tech in the opening game, if you guys recall. So they already beat a Big 12 team last year. You're at risk of losing that. Then you play Mississippi State, who is probably going to be one of the worst teams in the SEC, probably the second worst team in the SEC, though we haven't looked at that conference yet. But it's going to be one of the worst teams in the league, but they still probably just have a little bit better of a roster than you do. But you're at home. I have them as an underdog, but I don't think it's something that they can't win if maybe they surprise us. But then at Texas State, here's the thing. I don't know why you scheduled, I don't know why you're going to play at Texas State. Watch out, Sun Devils. Do not sleep when you head to San Marcos to face the Texas State Bobcats, because I'm telling you right now, my model thinks that is a close to a toss-up, like a slight favorite for Arizona State. But if you don't bring your A game, you might lose to the Bobcats there. So just watch out. So you get the point here. I'm not expecting them to go 3-0 in non-con. I think it'd be a win if they win two of those three games, if I'm going to be honest. That is extremely tricky non-conference slate right there. And then the Big 12 draw. I the most
It's a pretty tough
winnable
Big 12
game.
draw.
I mean, if we're going to be honest, depending on how you view Wyoming and BYU, I mean, and Mississippi State, like what's their most winnable game? I know you have
It's BYU. I would
Cincinnati
say
on the road.
BYU. I would say BYU because they're at home.
Yeah, they're at home against BYU, but I'd say you probably are more worried about losing to Texas State than you are on the road than you are going to face BYU at home. I mean, BYU's quarterback situation is also pretty terrible. So that might be one you got in the bank, but I'm just, the model is still saying you can get to 4 wins. So it's giving Kenny Dillingham the benefit of the doubt here. And I am too, but the schedule is just tough. And I'm not, especially at 4.5, there's no shot I'm laying the over there. There's no shot. So I'm going to go or under with medium confidence. The only reason, like I said, I'm not going with high confidence is because I do believe in Kenny Dillingham, and I do think that they had a lot of bad things not go their way last year. So we'll see. We'll see. But yeah, schedule is tough.
Mhm.
All right. Moving on to the aforementioned BYU Cougars. BYU comes in with a win total of 4 wins even, and it's a little bit of juice to the over at minus 140. Kalani Sitake, ninth season at BYU there in Provo. They went 5-7 last year. They really didn't have high expectations going to last season in their first year into the Big 12. I know they had a lot, they lost a lot last year off that roster, and they also had Keaton Slovis go down with an injury midway through the year. So BYU also dealt with quarterback problems last year, but I'd say them going 5-7 was actually a slight surprise for in a good way, I would say, because the expectations were pretty low. I don't know if you remember last year their win total was like 4.5. So they did beat that number, but of course, if you're a fan, I mean, you don't care about the win total. You want to make bowl games and you want to compete in the Big 12. But right now, the sportsbooks say 4 wins even is the line. What's your assessment of BYU in 2024?
I mean, they were barely a top 100 offense last year, Shoob, and that says a lot. Pretty bad offensive play. Look, man, it's not going to be any better at the quarterback position. I mean, yeah, Slovis went down last year, but I mean, you're down to your second or third string quarterback again this year, even with your starter. I mean, you've got Jake Retzlaff and then you've got Jerry Bohannon, who's on like his 16th school. So I mean, we legitimately don't have a good slate of quarterbacks here. You do have some experience with Bohannon, but none of these guys are proven commodities. None of these guys are solid quarterbacks. Then you've got LJ Martin coming back. He's a 500-yard rusher, but sub 5 yards per carry, not super efficient when we consider college level. And then the only notable wide receiver that you've got coming back is Chase Roberts, who's a pretty solid guy. But everyone else like really has to step up there. You know, I saw that Puka Nasua's brother is now on the roster, but he's not cracking the depth chart as of right now. So we'll see. And then I look at the O line, man, and you lose Kingsley Samataya. Uh, Shout out Jamal Charles for that draft night blunder.
Oh yeah.
Have you
Oh
seen
yeah.
that
That's right.
video?
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Ugh,
Yeah,
I
it's
don't
not
know
even
what
the
they were thinking.
pronunciation. It's not even the pronunciation of the name. It's just like he's just like the Kansas City Chiefs select. Go Chief. But anyway, since you lose Kingsley Samataya, you just don't recruit an elite level here, man. Like BYU is probably going to go downward on their offensive line play without, that big boy over there at tackle. And so there's really just nothing about this offense that I look at that I'm like, yeah, okay, I could see this, being this. So maybe if Retzlaff or Bohannon, takes a step forward this year, possibly, but with what offensive line, with what weapons to throw to, I just don't see it. Bohannon, I mean, he had time at Baylor and USF, and he had actually some decent receivers at USF at one point. And then at Baylor, I mean, he had a lot of talent around him, and he still wasn't that great. So I don't know, man. Kalani Sitake, you got a lot on your plate, man. I think he's a good coach, given the fact that they never recruit at an elite level over there at BYU, and they still, remain somewhat competitive at least before joining the Big 12. But yeah, man, I think it's gonna be rough for them. We look over at the defensive side of the ball. You've got three experienced defensive ends kind of returning in rotation, which I do like, and they're all pretty solid. They all grade out pretty well. So the D line could have the potential to be one of your stronger units of this team. So I do like that. So that at least gives you some hope to maybe force some quarterbacks to be uncomfortable, maybe force some turnovers, do whatever the case may be to keep you in games. But then we look back, and the linebacking room's not great. However, they did get a transfer in Jack Kelly, who I really like from Weber State, who grades out excellent as a pass rusher. PFF has him as a 91 graded pass rusher. So that BYU might be able to bring the heat against some teams. They've got good defensive ends. They got some linebackers that can rush those gaps. So BYU might be able to get some sacks on some people and force some turnovers. But other than that, man, secondary looks a little weak and inexperienced. They're going to have to step up at that level. Not really big there, but man, I will say the saving grace is the pass rush for this defense. But ultimately, man, this team doesn't have a lot going on for them. You start out with Southern Illinois in the schedule. You should win that game. You go at SMU. I don't expect you to beat SMU. SMU's too good. You go at Wyoming. That's like a toss up for me. You may or may not beat Wyoming, but let's say best case scenario is you do beat Wyoming.
What's with these
Um,
Big 12 schools and their love affair with scheduling Wyoming?
I know, right?
I don't get it.
Now, Wyoming's a quality Mountain West program. And then Kansas State, you open against Kansas State. I think you lose that one. You go at Baylor. That one is winnable versus Baylor, but we'll see what this new Baylor team looks like. I still think they're a notch above BYU this year, but that is certainly a game that BYU can win if they're able to force some turnovers and play efficient ball there. Then you get a bye week to prepare for Arizona. I don't think it's going to matter. You're still going to lose to Arizona. You're going to lose to Oklahoma State. You're going to lose to UCF. You get a little gauntlet right there. And then you get a bye week to play at Utah. So 4 games in a row, you're playing some pretty tough competition in the Big 12. And I think there's a pretty good chance you're going to go 0-4 in that stretch. There's a chance maybe you get lucky in one of those and you snipe one of these teams. But I think it's more likely that you're going to go 0-4 than 1-3 in that stretch. You get Kansas late season here, which could be a benefit to you because Kansas, we talked about it when we went over Kansas, Shoob. If Kansas loses Jalen Daniels by this point in the season, Kansas could be cooked. The backup quarterback play may not be that good. BYU's at home in this game, could have a fighting chance in that game if that's the situation that plays out. But if Jalen Daniels is healthy, there's no shot you're going to win this game against Kansas. And then you go at Arizona State, that is a winnable game, and you get Houston, which is a winnable game. So Shoob, I mean, I see Southern Illinois, I see at Wyoming, but if I'm being honest, I think I kind of lean Wyoming in that game. But let's just say best case scenario, they beat Wyoming. Then you've got Arizona State, Houston, that's 4. And maybe you steal one in the middle here. You got Baylor, that's a winnable. And then maybe you steal one from this gauntlet. I mean, that's like 5.5 winnable games, I would say. Um, I think 4-8 is pretty likely for them. I think 3-9 is unlikely. I'm really This is not one I would touch with money at all because I mean, there's just really nothing for me to gain out of it. I think 4-8 is kind of where it's at. I see them winning five? Not really. Do I see them losing, 9 games to be 3-9? I don't know about all that, but I'm gonna go ahead and say I'm gonna go push to under with low confidence on BYU. Actually, push to under with low confidence.
Push to under with low confidence. Yeah. So thing with BYU is, I look at this defense and I actually do like some of the things they have to work with on this defense. And it was quietly, average last year in the FBS, 54th last year in defensive efficiency. They did have one of the worst defensive lines in the Big 12 last year, but I do think they take a step forward this year, which is a good thing. But I really think like there is room for improvement here, and there are some positive things you can point to on the defensive side of the ball, but the offensive side of the ball, I'm just not seeing it. I'm not seeing it. Offensive line maybe gets a little bit better, but the quarterback situation, like Jake Retzlaff was pretty bad last year,
And I don't think this O
and
line's getting better. Shoot, they lost their best guy.
they did. They just returned some experience. Yeah, it is. It's probably a wash at best. But anyways, quarterback situation. Like Retzlaff was pretty terrible last year, and then you're bringing in Gary Bohannon. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. I've heard that name before. I'm like, wait a minute. That's the guy that won the Big 12 championship with Baylor in 2021, as you and I both know. I feel like we brought that up like three different times somehow. That's been referenced
When you're
on
talking
these,
about the Big 12, man, I mean,
but. So I look, I'm like, okay, so what happened to Gary Bohannon? What happened to this guy? And like he won a Big 12 championship at Baylor 3 years ago, and he went to USF and hardly played at all. He didn't even play a snap last year. He didn't even play. He didn't have the starting job at USF last year. He transfers to BYU. And I'm like, well, if you really look at Gary Bohannon's career, that 2021 season is the outlier. Like that just seems like a complete fluke. I don't know how the hell that happened. And again, that just complete fluke quarterbacks that have their career seasons slash games against Oklahoma State. I'll leave it at that. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole anymore. But it just blows my mind. But the guy didn't play last year. I know Retzlaff's pretty bad, but I don't you just can't expect him to just magically revive his 2021 season for BYU and bring them to a bowl game. I just do not see that happening. I really just think that the quarterback room is just going to drive this team's ceiling down for me. I really feel like that's really it. And I'm going to go under here with medium confidence. And I'm going at it with medium confidence because you got the push insurance there at 4, but I just don't see a path to I don't see a path to 5 wins. The only way that I see a path to 5 wins is if, of course, you take care of you beat Southern Illinois, that's in the bag. You win against Wyoming and then you beat Arizona State and Houston. And I feel like that's asking for much just to get to 4. And then either you take care of business against Baylor early in the season, Baylor ends up being a lot weaker than we expect, or maybe, like you said, Jalen Daniels gets hurt late season and you beat Kansas. But I feel like everything that I just mentioned, that these are all asking for prayers here. And you said you lean Wyoming. I mean, my model only has BYU as a 55% chance to beat Wyoming at Wyoming. So like that's a toss up. Model has it as a toss up. I just do not see a path here. And like you said, those weaker Big 12 opponents that they face at Baylor, at Arizona State, they're both away. You get Houston at home. That's the only weaker team you get at home. I just do not see a path here for 5 wins. So I'm going to go with medium confidence on the under. But if BYU does win 5 or they do get to a bowl game, I mean, that's a good coaching job by
that's a
Kalani Sitake.
great coaching job. If they get to a
Yeah.
bowl game, that is a great coaching job.
And if they do, it'll be because all of a sudden Jake Retzlaff just like turns into a god, or Bohannon just like puts on the magician hat and revives his 2021 Baylor days, which I don't see that happening. They do go play at Baylor, by the way, which is kind of interesting. So Bohannon will go back there to Waco in week 5. But anyways, yeah, I just don't see it. I don't see it. And I know there's rumors out there. There's rumblings. I know BYU fans aren't particularly happy right now with Kalani Sitake. So his days, if this season goes as we expect it to, his days there might be numbered. But we'll see. Overall track record shows he's a good coach, but you definitely don't want to fall back and get into the perception as one of the bottom tier teams in the Big 12 when you're in the new league. That's for sure. So I can't blame BYU fans there. All right, next up, the Colorado Buffaloes coming with a win total of 5.5 on Caesars. Little juice the over there, -140. Deion Sanders, head coach in his second season there in Boulder. Colorado went 4-8 last season. Unless you've been living under a rock, I'm pretty sure you were pretty in tune with what Colorado did last year. They started out 4-0 and probably was the biggest fluky 4-0 start that I think we've seen in recent memory. But you know what? It was the best time for it because it brought a lot of hype, a lot of attention to Colorado. And yeah, they did not make a bowl game last year, but a lot of the team is coming back this year. A lot of their star players are back, and they just went off to the races in the portal, just loaded up with talents, bring in a ton of talent in the portal, and it's Deion's second year. You got all your big horses back. What can we expect from Colorado in year two with Deion Sanders?
Being honest with you, Shoob, I think this team is better than it was last year. Will it translate on the field is the question here. I mean, Shadur Sanders obviously coming back, and he was crazy efficient last year. 3,200 yards, 27 touchdowns, and 3 picks. That's like insanely good. But I mean, he has been accused of taking sacks, and like just to like pat the stats, not risk throwing interceptions
Just
and,
bringing
and
that
things
up
like
right off the
that.
bat.
I mean, like, you know
Well,
what
it's
I mean?
true.
So, like, I mean, he has played well, but he has been accused of doing some more self-righteous, self-centered kind of actions.
I'm glad you
So
brought
we'll
it up
see,
because I
man.
was going to bring
The
that up.
culture, yeah, the culture is definitely something at Colorado that kind of concerns me with this team because I mean, there is, like potential with this roster. There absolutely is. I mean, you have brought in Pat Shermer as your OC. He's got a litany of NFL offensive coordinating experience. This dude has been around for a fat minute. And then you bring in Robert Livingston to be your new DC, who he was the defensive backs coach over at Cincy. So I don't really know about that one. But anyways, I do like that offensive coordinator hire of Pat Shermer. I think that at least gives them some potential, like a guy with NFL experience. And my guess is that Dion did that on purpose to try to get Shador like an offensive coordinator with NFL experience to prepare him for the NFL. And that's why he went out and got Pat Shermer. I look over at the running backs, man. The running backs are not impressive at all. It's just a bunch of transfers, and the only guy returning is Charlie Offerdahl, who's hasn't really done anything. So we'll see what they bring at that level. But I think this is going to be more of a passing team, obviously, because they want to get Shadur. I mean, you've heard Prime, man. You've heard Prime talk about it. He wants Shadur to go number one, and I think they're going to try their hardest to get him to go number one. They're gonna shoot for stats. Um, and so that's great news if you're Travis Hunter, who's coming back, if you're Jimmy Horn, who's coming back, who's pretty solid, or if you're Will Shepard, who comes in from Vanderbilt and who's a pretty solid receiver as well. So, I mean, they've got a solid little tandem of receivers there for Shedeur Sanders to throw to. So that's something to like right there. Now, in terms of their offensive line, man, I mean, you'll notice, I mean, with Colorado, transfer portal, I mean, like, on lines of scrimmage, they were all over the place in the transfer portal. Offensive line, in particular, they bring in Justin Myers from UTEP. He grades out pretty well, and then they have a bunch of rotational guys who are going to be either transfers or were there last year but didn't like play much or didn't do very well. And so this offensive line is a little bit of an enigma to me. Like it's really hard to discern what they are going to be with all these transfers. I would say that I think they can't be as bad as they were last year, right? Right? Because their offensive line was pretty bad last year. And I'm thinking that it has the potential to be maybe like average, if not slightly below average this year. We'll see. But if they even get average offensive line play, we're looking at a pretty solid offense here from Colorado. So that's one thing to really look at right here. I look at the defense, man, and like the whole depth of this defense, including some of the starters, are like all transfers. It's insane. Like it's a complete overhaul on the defensive side of the ball. Look, you bring in nose tackle Shidozi Nwanko from Houston. Really like that get. You get a defensive end from Arizona State and BJ Green, who grades out really well. You get Dayon Hayes from Pitt, who grades out really well. And then you've got a lot of other pieces on that D line as well, who grade out well, who are considered depth. This D line is going to be the strength of this defense. They're pretty dang good, actually. I really like this defensive line a lot, and I think they can be very disruptive in Big 12 play. They get Jalen Wester from FAU, who grades out well, but he's not even a projected starter. So we'll see what they're doing there in the middle of the linebacker spot. And then over at corner, man, I mean, you got Travis Hunter, you got Preston Hodge coming in from Liberty, who grades out like basically almost like elite Preston Hodge. And then you've got DJ McKinney coming in from Oklahoma State, who is one of their better corners. And then you've got Shallow Sanders returning. So, I mean, Shoob, I don't know about Robert Livingston as the coordinator, but the talent on this defense is there. Like the talent on this defense has the potential to be a top five defense in the Big 12, I think. And then if you get good offensive play, I mean, Colorado could very well be a pretty formidable team. Do I think they'll win the Big 12? No, but I think they'll be formidable. And they'll definitely give some people some games. They start the season with North Dakota State. I think they win that. North Dakota State's no pushover, but I think they win that game. Then we go at Nebraska. We'll see what that one looks like. Their non-conference is actually pretty tough, shoe, because you do get
Yeah.
North Dakota State, you get at Nebraska, and then you get out Colorado State, which is basically a rivalry. And so it's not going to be easy. I think maybe you go 2-1 in that stretch. Worst case scenario, you go 1-2. I think you beat Colorado State, North Dakota State. I expect you to win, but maybe the Buffs get you. But being at home, I'm going to say conservatively here, they go 2-1 in non-con. Then we go off. We play Baylor, and you're at home. Season conference opener, and you and I both mentioned, I mean, like Baylor, not as good as they once were. One of those teams that's on the lower end of the Big 12 this year. If you're going to win some games, I do like them to be a notch above Baylor. I lean to Colorado winning that game, especially at home. You go at UCF. We'll see, man. I mean, if this defense really does put it together, if Robert Livingston gets this defensive going, they could stand a fighting chance against UCF. You get a bye week to go at K-State. That's kind of key, man, because you get a bye week to prepare for Avery Johnson and K-State. And if your defense is firing on all cylinders again, this could actually be a pretty interesting game. It could be upset potential. Then you go at Arizona. Between K-State and Arizona, you're either going to go 1-1 or 0-2. You get Cincinnati. I think you beat Cincy. You go on a bye week to get at Texas Tech. So that's really nice, too. You get a bye week for K-State and Tech, two teams that are going to be kind of tough on your schedule. But if you're clicking on both sides of the ball, you could be playing pretty well at this point. Then you get Utah at Kansas, which we mentioned at Kansas late in the season could be an advantage for the same reason we mentioned that Colorado late season could be an advantage for some teams because the quarterback situation. Just one being an injury, one being a sit out. Which will it be? Shedeur Sanders, if it's not going their way this late in the season, Shedeur Sanders might opt to sit out and train for the draft. Versus, Kansas with, Jalen Daniels, who can't never stay healthy for a full season. So that's really interesting. And then if Colorado is firing on all cylinders and they go to play Oklahoma State at their home, there's a chance they could beat the Pokes there. So it just depends on what it looks like at the end. So I think this team is definitely good enough to go bowling this year, at least from a talent perspective. Will they put it together on the defensive side of the ball? I don't know if I trust Robert Livingston as a DC. That's kind of the thing that's making me nervous about this pick. But I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to go over on Colorado. I'm going to do it with low confidence. I think they can go 6-6, maybe even 7-5.
Over on Colorado at 5.5. Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. I was a little surprised to see this line come in at only 5.5. Caesars may be the low number here of all the sports books, but 5.5, it just feels like it's baiting you, isn't it? It just
It
feels
does
like
feel
you're
like
baiting
bait,
you.
but
Like take the over, they're going bowling. Which we know that in the sports books know that you're gonna have a ton of people betting on this. So it just very interesting. But yeah, man, I share the same optimism. I mean, let's just call it like we see it. Like you have a first round pick quarterback on this team. I mean, how often do you see a team with a first round pick at quarterback not even make a bowl game? I feel like you got to be pretty incompetent to not make a bowl game just with a first round pick at QB. But of course, they might be the outliers there. Travis Hunter, I thought this was interesting. The receiving core, I thought, kind of overrated last year. Travis Hunter graded out as the only plus value wide receiver last year. They did add obviously multiple starters in the portal. That's going to change. They're loaded up at receiver now this year. Same thing with the running back room. My thing with the offensive line is I know a lot of people are saying the offensive line last year is terrible, yada yada yada. Well, if you really look at the metrics, they weren't that bad. Okay, they weren't great, but they weren't that bad. The difference is the reason why you think their offensive line is terrible is because Shador's padding his stats by taking sacks all the time. If you go back and watch Colorado games, you look at Shador and you're just like, how many times do I see Shador Sanders in the pocket? And I'm like, dude, throw the ball away. Or like any other quarterback throws the ball away and he doesn't. He just sits there and takes the sack. And that shouldn't be counted against the offensive line. In fact, I think the offensive line, you got to grade them based off of their rushing ability, their rushing metrics rather than their pass metrics because of quarterbacks like Shador who hang onto the ball longer. That's not really indicative of the offensive line in my opinion. Yeah, there are some O lines that can't, block the pass rush as well, but if you have a good quarterback, he should be able to get the ball out and just not sit there and take sacks and make your offensive line look bad. So if you look at the metrics, you look at the guys they brought in, you look at the guys they had last year, I just don't think it's going to be more of the same. And Shador's going to take his sacks. It doesn't really matter who they brought in on the offensive line. So that's my say on that side of the ball. But if you look at the defensive side, the defensive line, yeah, of course, you already talked about it. They're going to get better. They brought in boatloads of talent along the defensive line. I really like that up front. But as far as the rest of the defense, I think, the defensive line should be a lot better. And then the secondary is got to be probably, would you say the secondary is one of the best in the Big 12? It's probably one of the best in all of college football. I think you
It
could make
looks
that
pretty
argument.
dang good. Yeah.
You can make the argument this is one of the best secondaries in all of college football, let alone the Big 12. So I like what I'm seeing on defense in terms of improving. I think they will improve from 98th overall in schedule adjusted efficiency on that side of the ball, even with Robert Livingston being an unknown as a play caller. So yeah, man, I agree. This team is better, especially on defense, and I think they are a little bit better on offense with Shador coming back as quarterback. The thing is, this schedule and this non-conference slate is pretty tricky. So my model, believe it or not, has 6.3 wins for Colorado. So my model is actually saying this is an overplay for Colorado. But if you look at the schedule, it is tricky. It's definitely not one of the easier Big 12 schedules, especially that back end. I mean, what we got 6 out of your final 7 games are against all of the top teams in the Big 12: Kansas State, Arizona, Texas Tech, Utah, Kansas, and Oklahoma State. I mean, unless I'm missing somebody, maybe Iowa State we're missing, but other than that, that's like 6 of the top 7 teams in the Big 12 right there. I mean, that's a tough back half of the schedule. But the model's still saying that Colorado can get to a bowl game here, and it's got to be done with wins up front here with North Dakota State. And the thing with North Dakota State is when I plug in the win totals on my model, I don't have FCS data. So what I've been doing is usually I just give an automatic +1 if you play an FCS team, which usually they are just an easy win. But with North Dakota State, I'm like, that's not just an easy win. So I gave Colorado a 75% chance to beat North Dakota State because North Dakota State is a team that if you plug them right into like the G5, if you plug North Dakota State into like the Mountain West,
They'll
they'd
probably
be a
do pretty well.
consistent, yeah, they'd be a consistent Mountain West contender every year. They'd be one of the better G5 programs at the FBS level. So I view that as like playing a pretty decent G5 team. That's not a complete guaranteed win. At Nebraska is tricky because my model actually likes Colorado over Nebraska, but the model's also pretty low on Nebraska. It's probably, if I had to guess, it's probably a good thing maybe that they get them early because Rayola is still settling in. I mean, that's only is going to be his second career game. The thing is, it is at Nebraska, so that's going to be tough. But that's going to be must-watch TV right there. I cannot wait for that game with the true freshman 5-star,
Hmm.
and then Shador Sanders and Colorado coming in, and then Colorado State. I mean, should have lost to them last year. I mean, Colorado State had you beat last year. So it's tough. I look at the schedule and the difficulty of it is offset by the fact that I do like the team getting better this year. And my model's telling me 6.3 wins. You know what, San? I originally had under because I was like, there's just so much downside potential here. The back end of the schedule is so tough, and if they hang up the cleats at any point in the back end of that schedule, I mean, they're going to lose all those games. So those are all the tougher teams in the Big 12. But on the same token, this is one of the last teams we're covering, and I go and look at the Big 12 and all the over-unders I have. I have so many unders, and I don't have that many overs. And I was like, you know what? This
Win's
could
got
be
to
a
come
team.
somewhere.
I was like, I gotta have an over because I can't just have all these unders everywhere because somebody has to win those games mathematically. And you know what? I flip-flopped and I was like, oh, I'll just give Colorado the over because my model's saying it's an overplay. Screw it. I'm flipping back to the under. I was under, I went over, and now I'm flipping back to the under because yeah, screw it. I can't have us both go over on Colorado. And if this downside plays out like it does, like I think it could, this team might not even make a bowl game.
I mean,
So
we've talked
screw
about
it.
that, Shub. If things don't go their way early season, I mean, there's a chance that come late season, Shedeur Sanders is sitting out saying, screw it, I'm preparing for the draft.
I mean, I'm just trying to think of let's say realistically here, at what point in the year do you think Colorado realistically is at a point where they are like, yeah, we are not in Big 12 championship contention anymore, which means you're
I
not
think the
in
Utah
playoff
game.
contention.
I think if they lose that Utah game, that at that point they're probably going to have a couple of other losses baked in there. At that point, I think that Utah game would be an elimination.
Yeah, and let's say that Utah game is an elimination. That probably means you got that one loss. Maybe you lost to Texas Tech, and then you probably lost to at least one of Arizona or Kansas State, if not both. So that's like already 3 or 4 losses at that point. And then who's to say that they took care of business against Nebraska? I mean, that's kind of a toss-up. Nebraska could end up being a pretty good team. And secondly, look at UCF. They got to go at UCF in the bounce house. My model actually has UCF favored in that game. I think UCF is a quietly decent team that could beat them for sure. I mean, even by the time they play Utah, they could have like 6 losses. Worst case scenario, I think.
If they already
But
have 6 losses by the time they play Utah, Shedeur is probably not playing in that game. So
yeah, so I'm looking at this and I'm like, even before the Utah game, if things do not go well, the cleats might have been hung up at this point. Yeah, it's a tough back half of the schedule, and I don't like the way that those scheduling dynamics work out personally. So screw it. I'm going under. We couldn't both go over on the Buffs. Okay, last but certainly not least, Utah, the Utes, our final Big 12 team here, and you could make an argument they are the best team in the Big 12 going into this season. They are the favorite according to the sports books going into this year, although albeit very slightly. Kyle Whittingham is in his 20th season at Utah. Can you believe it, man? This is going to mark 2 decades that Kyle Whittingham has been at Utah.
I
Just
mean,
a
Whittingham and Gundy, man, hired the same year, run this very similar program, both very successful. I mean, I'm telling you, they're just clones of one another, planted at different schools.
And it seems almost symbolic that in their 2 decade anniversary at both of their schools that they end up joining in the same conference and playing each
And
other
playing each other, yeah.
in the conference opener. So I just think it's very symbolic for many reasons. But yeah, I mean, Utah is just a staple of consistency, success, and arguably one of the best development programs in college football, if not the best development program in college football over the last decade or so. And now they join the Big 12, a conference where they definitely are one of the top dogs going into it. Right off the jump, they went 8-5 last year. A little bit of a disappointing season, I would say. I mean, of course, Cam Rising was out all of last year, so that you had going against you. And also the Pac-12 had one of its best seasons in a long time. We talked about it. That was a pretty good Pac-12 conference last year, probably the second best conference in football last year. You could make an argument they were close to the best. So they had a tough league last year and didn't have many things go their way as far as health and whatnot, but they still won 8 games. And now Cam Rising, I don't know how, but he is eligible for an eighth season of college football. Somebody tell me how that makes sense. I just got to say, I don't know how that makes any sense, but what? He's
I
eighth
say, I
season?
say, I
Is
say,
he
screw it, give the man
25?
10. I say, screw it, let him play until he's 30. Like,
I mean, is he? I'm not kidding. I think he's 25, right?
he's
He's
got to
got to
be.
be. He's either like like 24 or he's got to have be turning 25 at some point this year. Like that's
Well,
if you're 25,
I'll just
man,
have
that's
to
pretty
Google
old
it,
for
man.
playing college.
I'll just have
Yeah.
to Google it on the fly here.
For all we know, he may be 26,
He's
but
25 years old.
he is 25. Just yeah, I wasn't exaggerating. Yeah, I mean, so you got a 25-year-old quarterback coming back. I mean, that's probably a good thing. But Zan, I'll let you take it away. Take us away on the X's and O's, the ins and outs of this Utah Utes roster.
I mean, I love Utah, man. I mean, I just have so much respect for that program and Kyle Whittingham. I mean, they've had so much consistency over there. I love Morgan Scalley over there, the defense coordinator, who was basically named the head coach in waiting for whenever, Witt decides to hang it up, if Witt ever decides to hang it up. But that was pretty smart by the Utah brass to kind of give Morgan Scalley that title, because otherwise, you already know there were definitely some piranhas in the water circling around him, trying to poach him around. Yeah,
Lincoln
Lincoln
Riley.
Riley. Lincoln Riley was probably one of them. Yeah,
He was one of
legitimately.
them.
Yeah. And so that's why they had to offer him something to get him to stay. So good for them. Very smart move by the Utah brass. My concern here, Shub, with Cam Rising is that he hasn't played in such a long time. Is he going to be how long is it going to take him to get reacclimated into playing at a high level of football? Like, yes, you're taking reps in practice and doing all these things, but it doesn't translate to the real game. You've been out of real game action for a long time. That kind of concerns me a little bit with Utah. Now, if Cam Rising plays at his full potential, he's a dang good player. And Utah is going to be firing on all cylinders. But my concern here is that what if he's like a shell of himself or even 80% of himself? Is Utah going to be, what we expect them to be? Now, just in case Cam Rising gets hurt again, you got a little insurance policy in Sam Heward, but I mean, he came from Cal Poly. I believe he was a former 5-star, and he just got bounced around a bunch and then eventually went to Cal Poly, and then he came back up. So you've at least got a little insurance policy there at running or at quarterback, but I don't know, man. And the running back room isn't really all that great. You do have Jalen Glover, who's a 500-yard guy, but only at 4.1 yards per carry, which is extremely inefficient for college football standards. Um, you're probably going to have a dual, like he's probably going to share the backfield there with Micah Bernard. And then we look at the wide receiver room. They do bring in Dorian Singer from USC, who had a little stint at USC that didn't really go as planned, but he is a former 1,000-yard receiver back from his days at Arizona. So Dorian Singer is a talented guy who can potentially help Cam Rising elevate this offense. Then you've got Damian Alford coming in from Syracuse, who's a 600-yard guy. But otherwise, you've got like Money Parks and you've got a few other guys here, guys that really need to step up and and just really like help out in this offense. You need more than just these two guys, especially when Damian Alford's not even a projected starter at this moment, just a rotational guy. So that is a little bit concerning for me. There's nothing that really sticks out for me truly there. So we definitely, I don't know, man. There's just so much about Utah, so many question marks. But the thing that I keep looking at is their coaching, and it keeps making me like think like I don't like these things that I'm seeing, but I do know that Witt, Andy Ludwig, all these people know what they're doing.
You
And
have to
so it
trust
kind
the
of just gives
coaching
me
by default. Yeah.
exactly. So it kind of just gives me the benefit of the doubt, even though I don't really like what I see on paper. It really just it just boggles me, man. It kind of like has me fighting my own demons here. And then the offensive line, I think, is going to be at least an average unit, maybe even slightly below average. Their offensive line doesn't grade out too great, but we'll see. They do have some returning snaps there. I think it can at least be an average unit. Defensive line, they lost Jonah Ellis to the NFL. It's kind of a big loss. Nobody really grades well on that defensive line, but I don't know, man. It's Utah. They coach really well. Morgan Scalley had a top 15 defense last year in terms of schedule adjusted efficiency. That's with great reason. One of the best DCs in the entire nation. I think they can do something with that. On the back end, though, you do return linebackers Lander Barton and Kareem Reed. Really like their linebackers that they have. Really solid unit there for stopping runs and and disrupting passes. You also look though at the secondary. They lost two DBs to the NFL, Shoob, and I do know with Utah they develop really well. Like they constantly put DBs in the NFL, but nonetheless, that's got to hurt a little bit. You do return Zamiah Vaughn, who grades out pretty well, and you bring in Keenan Johnson from Georgia Tech. I do like you replacing that spot at the corner. But we just got some inexperience from the safeties, and they're going to have to step up a little bit. But I have faith in it, man. Like even like with most teams, I would look at that and I would be like, "Oh, inexperience at safeties. I don't know how I feel about that." But Utah's one of those teams I look at and I'm like, "Inexperience at safeties? No, they're experienced. They've been in the Utah system. They just haven't gotten to like the game time." And I fully trust Morgan Scalley, like I really do. And this is why I'm really struggling, Shu, because I was looking at this and I was thinking, what if this was like Minnesota or something? This wasn't Utah with this Utah coaching staff. What would I think of this team? And the truth would be, I would not be high on this team if it were a different coaching staff, a different team. But the fact that this is Utah and this is the Utah Utes, there's dang well they're going to be a good football team, man.
It's the same as Kansas State. I think we ran into the same issue with K-State where a lot of the players individually didn't grade the best, but as a unit, as playing as a unit together, their metrics were a lot better, especially on
Yeah,
the defensive side of the ball. And that's just coaching. And we both know Utah K-State A+ in coaching in that
absolutely.
category.
Now, Utah was outside the top 60 in terms of offensive efficiency last year, which is a little bit
Oh,
concerning.
That
But
was
if you
because they're starting backup quarterbacks all year.
that is true. But if you get some Cam Rising, I expect you to go back up, obviously. But the question is, how far does Cam Rising elevate you? Shoot, we were talking about some of these other Big 12 teams and how some of them are very well rounded. Some of them are top 30 on both offense and defense. So if you're trying to win the league here, you're going to need to be a well rounded team. Even if your offense gets better and say you're like 40th in offense, is it enough to carry you if you maintain, a top 20 defense? It's going to be hard in some of these games. Let's look at the schedule. Southern Utah is going to be a win. Baylor is going to be a non-conference game, so that'll be interesting. And I think they'll beat Baylor. You get Utah State, cool, easy 3-0. Then you get your Big 12 opener in like the battle of the Whittingham versus Gundy, like the
They're gonna have
great
a 20.
time,
They're gonna
great
have a
time,
giant 20-year
great time alma
anniversary
mater
cake.
coach. Yeah, legitimately, the great time alma mater coach squared, man. Like this is the mirror image fighting one another in this game. The game is at Oklahoma State. Truth be told, I know it's at Oklahoma State, but I would kind of lean with Utah in this game only because Oklahoma State always likes to drop something early season, and I think this would probably be where they like to do that. I would lean Utah in this game. Then they go play Arizona. I think between Oklahoma State and Arizona, I think they're going to drop one of those, Shub. I honestly do. I don't think they win both of those. If they do, this over is secure. But I think they're going to lose one of those games, and they'll come into this bye week at 4-1, which is pretty solid. Then you're going to go off the bye week. You're going to play at Arizona State. You're going to slaughter Arizona State. Then you're going to play TCU at home, which is nice because this is one of those more close match kind of games, and you're going to need that home field advantage that Utah gets. It's really hard to beat Utah at home, um, and that's why I'm going to give them the win here against TCU. You go at Houston, should win that. You get a bye week to prepare for BYU. You don't need the bye week to prepare for BYU, but you're gonna get it anyway, and you're gonna beat them. Then you're going to go at Colorado, which it depends on Colorado's season. If Colorado has an outside chance of making it, to the Big 12 championship, they're going to play you hard in this game. And you and I mentioned we both like what they have on the defensive side of the ball, and Colorado does have, the ability to potentially have a good offense this year too. They could be sneaky, but I still lean Utah in that game. And then you have Iowa State, who's tough, and at UCF to end the season. So those are two really tough games right there. And then, Shub, there is this, I believe you brought this up last year, that Utah's a much different team when they play away from home. And I think that could very much be the case if they're going at UCF late season. Now,
At
you're lucky that you
UCF and
get
the bounce house late season just screams. That screams like a nightmare right there.
it does.
That seems like a
And
trap.
and starting at Oklahoma State, I know the Utah fans are going to travel well for that one, but like you've got a lot of tricky away games here. But I will say I really like that they get TCU and Iowa State at home and Arizona at home. Three of your tougher Big 12 draws you get at home, and Utah is really tough to beat at home. So that is really key for your win total here. But my thing is their win totals at 9.5, Shub. I really like Utah, but I'm kind of scared of like a Cam Rising either just not playing up to his potential because he's been out for so long, or even Cam Rising just getting hurt again, and then we're stuck with Sam Heward. And even if that were the case, Utah would still be quite formidable, but they're not going to be, a Cam Rising Utah team. I can't believe I'm going to do this, Shoe, but I'm going to go under with one confidence point on Utah. I think 9-3 is more likely than 10-2.
Man, I did
But
not see that coming.
but I think Utah can still go 9-3 and make the Big 12 championship.
Of course, yes. So I'm surprised. I did not think that that was coming. So I felt like listening to you, I felt like I was reliving about 30 minutes ago or not 30 minutes ago, like 2 hours ago when I was reviewing this team. And because I had the same exact thought process. I'll start with the defense. 14th overall last year in defensive efficiency. You got 9 starters returning off that defense. I mean, this defensive line should remain as one of the top defensive lines in the Big 12. It would have been one of the top in the Big 12 last year. It should be one of the top this year, even with the loss of Jonah Ellis. Linebacker room is absolutely loaded. I love the linebacker room. It's loaded with depth, a lot of plus value players there. It's one of the best linebacker rooms in the league, if not one of the best in college football. And as far as the secondary, yeah, the grades not necessarily the best, but I would say that you have to trust the process here. I do think it's still going to be a very good secondary. Zemiah Vaughn, especially, I think, was a very high value plus corner. He's going to be back. I really do like what they have on this defense, and I think that this defense could jump into the top 10. And with Morgan Scalley calling the plays, of course, per usual, this could end up being a top 10 defense at the end of the year. And they're going to have some fun matchups against some good quarterbacks like Noah Fafita and then Shador Sanders potentially on the schedule. So I'm looking forward to that. And then as far as the offense, I'm glad you brought this up because I was going to kind of belabor this point about Cam Rising. I have a healthy skepticism here. He didn't play a single snap last year. He was hurt. I can't recall the last time a guy, off the top of my head, is there a player that sat out for an entire year at the college level and just immediately lit it up as if like he didn't skip a beat?
I don't know about the college level, no.
It's it's something that I'm a little skeptical about. And like you said, I don't think Cam Rising going to fall off the map in terms of his play, but I would say you probably get 80 to 90% of Cam Rising at quarterback. I don't know if you get the prime 2022 or prime 2021 version of Cam Rising. I don't know if that's what's in store here, but if they do get it, then that's great, obviously for Utah. But I don't know if we're gonna get the full healthy version of Cam Rising like he was 3 years ago. So I remain skeptical in that department, but just by default, having him back, you're going to be better at quarterback than you were last year. It's still a massive upgrade, don't get me wrong. In terms of relativity to last year, this offense is going to take a huge jump. I could see it end up being a top 30 offense, I'll say conservatively, even with Rising maybe not necessarily playing up to his peak potential after a year of sitting out and with the injury. But I also do like that they have Brant Kuithe coming back. I know you mentioned that earlier, but Kuithe coming back at tight end, I mean, that's a great two tight end set there. I know they're going to run a lot of two tight end sets, 12-man personnel with Brant Kuithe and Landon King, who is also a plus value starter there at tight end. So that's really continuing the great line of great tight ends coming out of Utah. I think that they got two really good ones as well. So there's a lot to like here. And as far as the offensive line, I just want to point out, shout out Caleb Lomo, redshirt freshman left tackle, showed some upside last year in limited snaps. He has potential, I think, to be one of the best offensive linemen on this team, and they're putting him in at left tackle as a freshman. So I think that that's pretty telling
It's a
right
lot
there.
of
So
respect, yeah.
that is a lot of respect for Caleb Lomo. So look out for him. But I think overall defense, if you get best case scenario, you get the defense inside the top 10. I think best case scenario, you get the offense firing inside the top 30 this year. If you get a good Cam Rising and a defense that continues the Morgan Scalley way. But as far as the schedule, so this is the thing that was really killing me here is that this schedule is actually kind of light, I would say, compared to a lot of the other Big 12 schedules. I'd say Utah actually got one of the lighter Big 12 draws. I know they got Arizona and Oklahoma State on here, but I think that, they didn't necessarily get the toughest draw. You got Houston, you got Arizona State, you got BYU. Those are right off the bat, three of the worst teams in the league. And then I know the
That's
Baylor
just three
game.
wins, yeah.
And I know the Baylor game is technically a non-conference game as they're finishing that home-on-home non-conference series, but that's still a Baylor Big 12 team. That's probably one of the bottom half teams in the Big 12. So it's really not that tough a schedule. And then Utah State, shout out that name of the rivalry there, which by the way, I just want to shout out Utah has the best rivalries, or the state of Utah has the best rivalry names in all of college football because you got
The
Utah
Civil
at
War.
Utah State is the
Oh no,
battle of the brothers.
yeah.
And then you have Utah versus BYU, which is obviously the
Holy
Holy
War.
War.
Yeah, that's what it is.
I love that name. That is a badass rivalry name. And shout
Civil
out
War
to
is
the,
working Oregon State.
yeah, well, they took that one away but yeah, the Holy War is awesome. And Battle of the Brothers, Utah versus Utah State. I think that's pretty cool. And so shout out to the Big 12 for finally forcing Utah and BYU to finally play each other in the same conference, kind of like how Texas and Texas A&M
That needs to be
are
a
forced
protected
to play each other
rivalry.
now.
So
Yeah, it absolutely should be a protected rivalry. And I don't know why they're not playing on Thanksgiving.
they
That
don't want
should
to play
be
each other either. Like it's funny. They
that's
hate
the
each other
thing.
so much they
It's
don't want to play.
But that's the thing. Like the Holy War should be the Thanksgiving week, rivalry week, like last game of the regular season. That should be Thanksgiving every year is Utah versus BYU. Come on, Big 12. What are you doing here? Um, but anyways, my model is not a fan of the Utes. My model has 8.2 wins for Utah in the regular season. That's pretty low. That's a strong underplay that my model is suggesting. And honestly, I wonder if potentially it's not necessarily accounting for Cam Rising coming back fully. That's the one thing that I'm trying to point at here. I'm just like that. It's the only thing that's got to make sense to me is maybe it's not accounting for Rising sitting out last season and coming back. But it doesn't make sense to me. But at the same time, I also do have that healthy skepticism like you. And I saw this line at 9.5. I see the juice of the over, and I see
Seems like a
reasons for
trap.
it. It is kind of a trap, but I see the reasons for it. This schedule is pretty light. I mean, if you just win one of the Oklahoma State or Arizona games, or let's say you win both of those two, you're winning double digit games. We both really like Iowa State a whole lot, but even if you have an Iowa State loss baked in there, which by the way, that's at home, it's hard to count up like four losses here, but that's what my model's
I
saying. I
mean,
do not
TCU's
agree with
tough,
it.
but you have TCU at home. We'll see what Colorado looks like at that point in the year. Iowa State can be tough, but you're at home. But then you go at UCF. At UCF could be tough if UCF still has something to play for by that time of the season. So we'll see.
So that's the thing. I think those final two games there are actually really tricky because you have Iowa State, granted at home, but Iowa State is severely underrated in my opinion. You like them a lot too. Iowa State's going to be a Big 12 contender this
They are.
year. And then at UCF in the bounce house, it's on a Friday too, by the way. So that's a short week. You got to travel to the bounce house. And that's an upset alert game right there for sure. I mean, just looking at it. So the back end of that schedule is sneaky, maybe a little tough, but even still, like if Utah truly plays to their strengths, you should take care of UCF and you should probably beat Iowa State if you're at home in that game. Colorado late in the season, probably going to be a good thing. You drew BYU, ASU, and Houston. That's nice. I mean, most of their tougher games are at home. The only tougher team that they have away is Oklahoma State, and it's hard for me to do this, but I'm gonna tell you, Zan, I'm gonna go under with very low confidence, granted.
Oh,
Uh,
I thought you were teeting the other direction because you're talking about the schedule and how it's so easy and then like how good the coaching is. I mean, everything you're saying says over, but then we're going undershoot.
Basically mirror images of each other on our two segments because I was listening to everything that you were saying, and then you were like at the last second hanging a 180, like, wait a minute, no, I'm going under. And I'm like, shoot. I'm like, shoot, Zan stole my thunder because I was saving that for my bit here. I was gonna end the Big 12 with a huge 180
Utah
with
fans
an
are going to
under
be
on
quite
Utah.
upset with us, but I will
Oh,
say
I know they
this.
are, but
I will say this, Utah fans, even though we're both going under, it doesn't mean that you're not going to be in the Big 12 championship game. I think the Big 12 championship game is going to be between two teams that probably have at least two losses in the conference. It's going to be a dog eat dog kind of conference. So
yeah, I'll end this video with 2 points for Utah fans. One, if you don't hit this win total, you only win 9 games. You go 9-3. You probably are still in the Big 12 championship game.
probably so.
Even if you don't get the right tiebreakers, I mean, that would be the only way you don't make the Big 12 title game. And two, I'll say this. Now that I've done my assessment on this team, my model's telling me this is a low underplay. I'm thinking, is there a sportsbook out there where I can get a win total of 10? Because if I can get them at 10, I might put some personal money on this because I'm
Because
not
10 is push
buying
insurance.
10 is push insurance, and I'm not buying the whole Cam Rising is going to come back and be a Heisman contender thing. So I might put some personal money on that. So come at it with me, Utah fans. Let us know in the comments what you guys think. But yeah, I mean we're probably we might be in the minority here because like for instance, Phil Steele, he has Utah as a national championship contender, which I think
I
is a
mean,
little
if you win
crazy.
the Big 12, you're technically a national championship
Well,
contender because you technically are in the playoff bracket. So
not in that sense though. Not just winning the Big 12 puts you in the playoff as a contender. He thinks they are legitimately like they can win a couple playoff games and compete with, the SEC and the Big 10 top dogs for the national championship. He loves Utah. And I don't agree with that, but I'm just saying there's other people out here
I
that
think
think Utah is a
they are really
legitimate
well
tail.
coached, man. They are really well coached, and that's the only thing. They're a model of consistency, as you said when we started this segment. But I don't know about beating up on like the Ohio State or Michigans of the world or the Bamas. I don't think they're going to beat those teams. But I mean, they're certainly like there's levels to this, like you mentioned tiers, and they're at the top of their particular tier.
I
And I
agree with
put them
that.
in the same tier with like Oklahoma State.
Yeah, and that's going to be a big one. That's going to be one that is going to be big for the win totals for both Utah and Oklahoma State.
True.
Yeah, I cannot wait for that game, and I can't wait for the giant 20-year anniversary cake that they bring out to the middle of the field there at Boone
They need to do
Pickens
that.
for
They need to
Gundy
do
and
that.
Whittingham. Yeah,
They absolutely need to do that.
the model success for development programs right there, facing off in the Big 12 opener. All right, man. That'll conclude the Big 12. This was fun, man. I had fun doing this league. No surprise there. This is our bread and butter. And now that we've covered this league, I will ask you the question here. I know we're going long in this video, but I know this is tough. This is probably going to be the toughest guess here. But as of right now, what is your Big 12 championship game and who wins it?
You know what, man? I'm going to go with one OG and one newcomer. I'm going to go Utah and screw it. Give me the Pokes.
Utah versus Oklahoma State. So you have a rematch of that Big 12 opener in week
I
4.
do. Yep.
I'd sign up for that. Who do you have winning the Big 12?
I'll say whoever lost the first matchup wins the championship game.
I like it. So I am not going to go chalk here, and I'm gonna call my shot here. And this is not official. This is not an official prediction. So this is subject to change. We'll put out our official predictions later, but my Big 12 championship game is going to be, as of right now, Iowa State versus Texas Tech.
That would be interesting because that's like
That
two people that we never see in it really. So, or
I
two
I
teams.
think that there is going to be, and keep in mind there are going to be some crazy tiebreakers because of how close these teams are, and that's one thing that Big 12 fans and any college football fans, the other leagues too, just be ready because with the way the leagues are set up and that not everybody plays everybody, there are going to be some crazy tiebreaker scenarios. And I think every college football fan should read up on their conference's tiebreaker process because there's going to be instances where you have teams that for instance, the Big 12 is going to have years where it's not putting its best two teams in the championship game because of simply some crazy head-to-head tiebreakers or some third rung down the ladder tiebreakers, strength of schedule, all that BS. Because like there's 16 teams in the league, half these teams don't even play each other or see each other on the field, and they're going to be going at it in terms of tiebreakers for these championship games. And we won't know because they haven't played each other. And some teams have played X teams, some teams have played Y. And a lot of it's going to come down to luck. It's simply going to be called tiebreaker luck, and I think that's a new term that we're going to have to start implementing into our vocabulary. Is it's going to be simply like who the hell is lucking out with the tiebreakers because it's just like flipping rolling dice. Like I think that's what's going to end up being. So my roll of the dice is saying that Iowa State and Texas Tech luck out with tiebreakers, and they beat out the Utahs and the Oklahoma States and the Kansas States, etc., Arizona, and that's my way too early unofficial Big 12 prediction is Iowa State versus Texas Tech, and I have the Iowa State Cyclones and Matt Campbell winning the Big 12 conference. I'm calling my shot. Iowa State is my sleeper team this year for 2024. That one might stick. I don't know about Texas Tech for the
What
official
if
one.
Rocco Beck goes down?
Well, that's probably in the toilet, but you know
You
what? I could
can
say
say
the
that about a
same
lot
thing
of these
about
teams.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, especially in this league, man. Like if your quarterback goes down, like you sink to the bottom pretty quickly in this
Unless you're
league. Like
Oklahoma State, because I feel like I don't know, Alan Bowman might not even be the best quarterback like that they
Oklahoma
have.
State is one of the exceptions, and that's why we were both over on them. But if I'm like Arizona, you lose Fafita,
You're
you don't have
screwed.
Delore
Yeah.
anymore, you're screwed. You have Jalen Daniels, he goes down for Kansas. Jalen
No
Daniels
Jason
goes
Bean.
down,
You're
no
screwed.
Jason Bean, you're screwed. Um, Kansas State, Avery Johnson, you don't have Avery Johnson and Will Howard anymore. You just have Avery Johnson. He
You're
gets hurt,
screwed.
you're
Yep.
screwed. We could do this over and over.
We can do
I
this
mean,
all day.
Utah, what does Utah have behind Cam Rising? All the guys like Bryson
They've
Barnes
got
and
Sam Heward.
yeah, but I'm sorry, you're not
Exactly.
making the Big 12 championship with Sam Heward. Cam Rising
Yeah.
gets hurt again. Utah down. Uh, I mean, who else? What other teams are we missing here?
TCU, man, if Hoover goes down,
Yeah, right. Off the top of my head, I forget who their backup is, but I don't think it's anybody that good. I mean, you could say this about like the entire league. I think That is one reason. That's
Oh,
one good
UCF,
thing.
if KJ Jefferson goes down.
Yes, that's a good one because McLean transferred out too. Timmy McLean did. Yeah, there's a lot of these teams have like no quarterback insurance. Oklahoma State
And,
might be the only team that
and you know
actually
what
has some
sucks,
quarterback
Shub?
insurance.
This is why, like, and it comes to like Big 12, like some of these lines for like some of these teams that are going to be in competition for like the title, I'd be scared to bet because I bet you at least one or two quarterbacks does go down this year.
Y-
And those are going
It's
to be the
gonna
teams
happen.
who are going to tank on their win total.
Yeah, it's gonna happen, which is why, again, especially for this league in particular, I'm not gonna be betting win totals. Iowa State, I think, is an exception. I'm betting conference futures. So basically, I like to say, for instance, Iowa State, if I'm not going to bet the win total because there's just so much variance here with whether the quarterback is hurt or not in this league, that I'm going to say I'm going to take the shot 12-1 that you win the Big 12 championship, and hopefully I get to hedge that at the end of the year if you make the title game. If they don't, then so be it. At least I don't have to worry about that. I like just taking shots, like kind of like whack-a-mole, like take your shots at a couple of conference title futures, but I wouldn't necessarily play win totals. I think win totals is better for leagues like the Big Ten and the SEC and the ACC, where there's huge disparities of talent across the top and the bottom of the league. So I don't feel comfortable playing win totals here, and that's why I think I only have one high confidence play, I think, in this entire league. So that's the gist of it. So all right, man. We'll let's cut it here. I know we've gone long in this video. Hopefully you've enjoyed this little discussion here at the end of this video, but we have now conquered the Big 12 and there's one Power 4 conference remaining. That is the SEC. And we will end with the SEC in the remaining 3 videos, and that will be divided up. We're going to go geographically east, central, and then west to wrap up the SEC and win totals. And then we'll start heading out for our official predictions on the channel. Can't wait to get those out as well. So again, as always, if you're a fan, one of these teams, leave a comment, leave a like, let us know your thoughts and opinions in the comments. I'm sure Utah fans might have some things to say to us. So bring it here, bring it here. And yeah, so that's it. For the Saturday Scholars, Xan and Shoob signing out. See y'all later and have a great day.
Saturday scholars on the mic, breaking it down so right. Their analysis hits the target, prediction accuracy so razor tight. Bank account on the rise with each winning call. Not here for hot takes, just the facts, that's all. Getting out, shooting snacks and zany bars, a treat for each week. College football fans rejoice, find what you seek. Hitting gem in the podcast world, they know ball. Saturday Scholars anthem, standing tall and tall. Saturday Scholars, the kings of the game, making waves with the knowledge, bringing the fame. Tune in each week, we stay on track. The Saturday Scholars, we got your back. The Saturday Scholars, the kings of the game, making waves with the knowledge, bringing the fame. Tune in each week, we stay on track. The Saturday Scholars, we got your back. Oh, oh. Oh, oh. Getting out, shooting snacks and zany balls, a treat for each week. College football fans rejoice, find what you seek. Hidden gem in the podcast world, they know ball. Saturday Scholars anthem, standing tall and tall.